I used to believe that family bonds were unbreakable, that the love I poured into raising my daughter would be reflected in how she and her husband treated me in my golden years. But I never imagined that the very man she married, the father of my precious grandchildren, would one day look me directly in the eyes and tell me I was no longer welcome in their home. What he didn't know was that I'd spent decades building a financial safety net that would change all their lives. And with a single phone call that evening, I altered the course of my family's future. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Ophelia Nightingale. At 72, I've lived long enough to recognize that life rarely unfolds according to plan. I was widowed early, lost my husband Theodore to a sudden heart attack when our daughter Eleanor was just 12. We had built a modest life together. He was a professor of literature at Westfield University, and I ran a small but successful bookshop downtown. When he passed, I was left with a grieving child, a mountain of medical bills, and the stark reality that I now carried the weight of our family's future alone. Those early years were difficult. I sold our large family home and moved us to a smaller 2-bedroom apartment above my bookshop. Every morning, I would rise before dawn to balance the books, organize inventory, and prepare the store for opening, all before waking Eleanor for school. In the evenings after closing, I would sit with her at our small kitchen table, helping with homework despite my own exhaustion. There were nights I'd cry silently in my bedroom, wondering if I was doing enough being enough, but I never let Eleanor see those moments of doubt. Through careful management and countless sacrifices, I managed to build something meaningful. The bookshop thrived as I expanded into rare editions and educational materials. I lived frugally, investing every spare dollar with meticulous attention. By the time Eleanor graduated high school, I had not only paid off our debts, but had saved enough to send her to Westfield University, her father's alma mater, without a single student loan. "Mom, you've done too much already," Eleanor protested, when I showed her the college fund. "You should be saving for retirement." "I am," I assured her with a smile. "But your education is part of my investment in the future. Your father would have wanted this." She excelled at university, graduated with honors in business, and secured a position at a prestigious marketing firm in the city. I couldn't have been prouder. And when she met Richard Harrington, a charming architect from a wealthy family, I was genuinely happy for her. He was handsome, ambitious, and seemed to adore my daughter. Their wedding was lavish. His parents insisted on paying for everything, making it clear that my modest contribution wasn't necessary. "Don't worry about it, Ophelia," Richard's mother said with a dismissive wave. "We can handle it. Just enjoy being mother of the bride." I sensed a subtle condescension in her tone but brushed it aside. This was Eleanor's day, and I wouldn't let anything diminish her happiness. The years that followed brought joy in the badge form of my grandchildren, twins, Lily and Lucas. I was there in the hospital the day they were born, my heart expanding with a love I hadn't felt since Eleanor was placed in my arms. From that moment, I committed myself to being the grandmother who was always present, always supportive. When Eleanor mentioned she wanted to return to work after maternity leave but worried about childcare costs, I didn't hesitate. "I'll watch them," I offered immediately. "I can adjust the bookshop hours. Mrs. Calloway has been asking for more responsibility anyway." "Are you sure, Mom? That's a lot to take on at your age." "At my age?" I laughed. "I'm not ancient yet, dear. Besides, what could be more important than being with my grandchildren?" For 3 years, I spent my days divided between running my business and caring for the twins. I would close the shop at 2, drive to Eleanor and Richard's suburban home, and take over childcare until one of them returned from work. I read to the children daily, taught them their letters and numbers, took them to the park, and baked cookies from Theodore's old family recipes. Those were precious days, watching their personalities blossom, hearing their laughter fill the rooms. What I didn't realize was that my presence was creating tension. Richard began making comments, little barbs that seemed innocent enough at first. "The twins are getting too attached to your way of doing things," he remarked one evening as I was preparing to leave. "Is that a bad thing?" I asked lightly. "Well, they live here with us, so they should be following our household rules, not Grandma's special exceptions." I nodded, trying to be understanding. "Of course. I always try to respect your parenting decisions." Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Do you? Because Lucas told me that Grandma lets them have ice cream before dinner sometimes." It was true. Occasional treats were part of our special time together. But the way he said it made me feel as though I'd committed some grave offense. The comments continued, growing more frequent and less subtle. Richard would rearrange the toys I'd organized with the children, claiming my system made no sense. He would question the books I chose to read them, suggesting they were too advanced or not educational enough. He began coming home earlier, on days I was there, ostensibly to help, but really to hover and correct me. Eleanor noticed but tried to smooth things over. "He's just particular about how things are done," she would say. "You know how architects are. Everything has to be just so." I bit my tongue, not wanting to create problems between them. Instead, I adjusted, becoming increasingly careful about every interaction with my grandchildren when Richard was present. Then came the preschool discussion. The twins were turning 4, and Richard insisted they needed to attend Blue Harbor Academy, an exclusive preschool with an eye-watering tuition. "It's the feeder school for Westridge Prep," he explained during a family dinner. "The right early education sets the foundation for getting into the right colleges." "They're 4, I said gently. "Isn't that a bit young to be mapping out their entire academic future?" Richard's expression hardened. "Not if you want them to succeed in today's world." "But the cost," I began. "We can manage," he cut in sharply. "Eleanor's getting a promotion, and my firm is doing well. I knew their finances better than," he realized. Eleanor still confided in me, and I understood that between their mortgage, Richard's car payments, and their lifestyle, adding elite preschool tuition for twins would strain them considerably. But before I could respond, Richard delivered the real blow. "Besides, this means we won't need your childcare services anymore. You can go back to your bookshop full-time." The dismissive way he referenced my business, my life's work, that had supported us through the hardest times, stung deeply. But I maintained my composure. "I see. Well, if that's what you think is best for the children." Later that night, as I was preparing to leave, I overheard Richard speaking to Eleanor in the kitchen. "Thank God we're finally getting your mother out of our hair," he said, not bothering to lower his voice. "I'm tired of her old-fashioned ideas influencing the kids." Eleanor's response was quieter, but I could still make out her words. "Richard, she's been a huge help to us. We couldn't have afforded—" "We would have figured it out," he interrupted. "Your mother acts like she's indispensable, like we owe her something." "We do owe her," Eleanor insisted. "She's done so much for us, for me." "That's the problem. With you, Eleanor. You still act like you're that poor little girl from the apartment above the bookshop. We're different now. We've moved up. Your mother is just— she's holding you back. Holding us back. She doesn't fit with our life anymore." My heart constricted painfully in my chest. I stood frozen by the coat rack, my hand clutching my cardigan as Eleanor's voice rose slightly. "That's a terrible thing to say." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "She's my mother, Richard. And I'm your husband. The twins are our children. We need to present a united front on how they're raised, and your mother undermines me at every turn." She does, and I've made a decision. After They start at Blue Harbor. I don't want her coming over unannounced anymore. No more surprise visits, no more swooping in to save the day. If she wants to see the kids, she can schedule it properly, like a normal grandmother. There was a pause, and I held my breath, waiting for my daughter to defend me. To stand up and remind her husband of all we had overcome together, of the sacrifices I had made to give her the opportunities that led her to this very life. Instead, I heard a soft, defeated, "Okay, Richard, I'll talk to her." Something inside me cracked then. A fissure running through the foundation of what I believed about my family, about my place in their lives. I quietly slipped out the front door without saying goodbye, my mind a whirlwind of hurt and disbelief. The following week brought an awkward conversation with Eleanor. She sat across from me at my kitchen table, nervously turning her coffee mug between her palms. "Mom, Richard and I have been talking, and with the twins starting preschool." She hesitated, not meeting my eyes. "We think it might be good to establish some more structure around your visits." "Structure," I repeated flatly. "Yes, like maybe coming over on Sundays for lunch, or we could schedule specific days that work for everyone." I studied my daughter's face, the face I had wiped tears from countless times, the face I had watched transform from a grief-stricken child to a confident young woman. Now it wore an expression of uncomfortable obligation. "Eleanor, just say what you mean. Richard doesn't want me around as much." She flinched. "That's not," she began, then sighed. "He just thinks the twins need consistency, and sometimes, when you're there, the routines get disrupted." "I see," I said, keeping my voice measured. "And what do you think?" Her eyes darted up to mine, then away again. I think it's important for me and Richard to be on the same page as parents." The words hung between us, heavy with implication. My daughter was choosing her husband's comfort over my presence in their lives. After everything, I had become an inconvenience to be managed. "Very well," I said finally. "I understand." But understanding didn't ease the ache in my chest. That evening, alone in my apartment above the bookshop, I pulled out the album of family photographs I kept on my bedside table. There were pictures of Eleanor as a baby, as a grinning toddler with Theodore, as a solemn young girl at his funeral. There were more recent ones, too. Me holding Lily and Lucas in the hospital, the four of us at the park, baking sessions in my kitchen. As I turned the pages, I realized something with painful clarity. Richard wasn't just limiting my access to my grandchildren. He was systematically erasing me from their lives. The thought of Lily and Lucas growing up without knowing how deeply they were loved by their grandmother was unbearable. I closed the album and made a decision. If Richard wanted to redefine my role in the family, I would need to protect myself and the legacy I had built. The next morning, I called my financial advisor, James Whitaker. We had worked together for decades, and he understood my situation intimately. "James," I said when he answered, "I need to make some changes to my estate planning, particularly regarding the education funds for my grandchildren." "The college accounts? They're quite substantial now, Ophelia. Almost enough to cover full tuition at any private university when the twins come of age." "Yes, those. I want to redirect them." There was a pause. "May I ask why?" "You've been contributing to those accounts since the day the twins were born." I took a deep breath. "Let's just say I'm reconsidering my investments. I'd like to explore options for using those funds to expand the bookshop instead. Perhaps add an educational foundation in Theodore's name." James, ever the professional, didn't press for details. "I understand. I'll draw up the paperwork and send it over for your signature." 2 days later, I signed the documents that removed nearly $400,000 from the twins' college funds and redirected it into a newly established Theodore Nightingale Literary Foundation. The foundation would provide scholarships to deserving students from low-income backgrounds, students like Eleanor had once been. I told no one about this decision, not yet. Part of me still hoped that Richard's attitude would soften, that Eleanor would find her voice, that I wouldn't need to take such drastic measures. But life rarely gives us the resolutions we hope for. The next confrontation came 3 weeks later, at Lily and Lucas's 4th birthday party. Richard's parents had taken over the planning, transforming it into an extravagant affair at their country club. There were professional decorators, a hired children's entertainment troupe, and a guest list that seemed to include everyone except people the twins actually knew and liked. I arrived early with my gifts, hand-bound collections of classic children's stories I had carefully curated and personalized for each child. When I entered the club's grand ballroom, Eleanor was arguing with Richard's mother about the cake placement. "Ophelia," Richard's mother acknowledged me with a brittle smile. "You're early." "I wanted to help set up," I replied, setting my gifts on the designated table. Richard appeared from across the room, frowning at the packages. "What are those?" "Books," I said simply. "Special collections for the children." He picked one up, thumbing through it with disinterest. "We already have plenty of books for them. The latest educational tablets would have been more useful." I maintained my smile. Every child should have books that belong just to them. These are classics, stories that have stood the test of time. Richard set the book down carelessly. "Well, the gifts from our side of the family are more practical. College funds, investment accounts." He trailed off, giving me a pointed look that clearly communicated his opinion of my modest offering. The party progressed with mechanical efficiency. The twins were paraded around like prized possessions, introduced to Richard's colleagues and his parents' friends. They looked overwhelmed and uncomfortable in their formal clothes. Nothing like the joyful children who built blanket forts in my living room. When it came time for cake, I noticed Lucas's lower lip trembling. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, kneeling beside him. "This isn't the cake I wanted," he whispered. "I told Daddy I wanted a dinosaur cake like we saw in your bakery window." My heart sank. The elaborate tiered confection bearing the Blue Harbor Academy logo was clearly Richard's idea of making an impression, not celebrating his son's interests. "Sometimes grown-ups get silly ideas about what's important," I told him softly. "But next time you come to visit me, we'll make the biggest, scariest dinosaur cake you've ever seen, just for us." Lucas's face brightened. "Promise?" "Cross my heart." Richard appeared at that moment, overhearing our exchange. His jaw tightened visibly. "Lucas, go join your sister for photos," he instructed. Once the boy was out of earshot, Richard turned to me, his voice low and cold. "Stop making promises you won't be keeping, Ophelia." "What do you mean?" I asked, though a sinking feeling told me I already knew. "I mean that after today, your little visits with the twins are going to be much less frequent. Eleanor and I have decided it's for the best." I glanced across the room at my daughter, who was adjusting Lily's party dress, seemingly oblivious to the conversation taking place. "Eleanor agreed to this?" "She understands what's best for our family," Richard said dismissively. "The twins are starting at Blue Harbor next week. They'll be making friends with the right sort of children, developing connections that will serve them well in life. They don't need to be confused by alternative influences." "Alternative influences," I repeated slowly. "You mean their grandmother who loves them?" Richard's expression remained impassive. "I mean someone who doesn't understand our world, our ambitions for the children. Someone who still thinks reading fairy tales is more important than coding classes for preschoolers." I felt a surge of anger rising within me. "Those children are 4 years old, Richard. They need love and play and imagination, not networking opportunities." His eyes narrowed. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. Your outdated ideas have no place in their education. Eleanor and I have a vision for their future, and frankly, you're not part of it." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'm their grandmother. And I'm their father, he countered, leaning closer. Let me be perfectly clear, Ophelia. You are not welcome to drop by unannounced anymore. You will not undermine my parenting decisions. And if you can't accept that, then perhaps it's better if you don't visit at all. In that moment, looking into his cold, calculating eyes, I realized that Richard had never seen me as family, was a relic from Eleanor's past, a past he wanted to erase, to replace with his vision of what her life should be. And somehow he had convinced my daughter to go along with it. I see, I said quietly. Thank you for being honest at least. I stayed for the remainder of the party, watching from a distance as my grandchildren were shuttled from activity to activity according to a strict schedule. Neither of them seemed particularly happy, but they were being molded into the perfect accessories for Richard's aspirational lifestyle. As guests began to leave, I approached Eleanor, who was collecting discarded gift wrap. We need to talk, I said softly. About what Richard just told me. She straightened, avoiding my gaze. Mom, this isn't the time. When is the time, Eleanor? When Richard decides it's convenient? When the twins are grown and don't remember who I am? Her eyes darted nervously toward where Richard stood chatting with his parents. He's just trying to establish boundaries. No, I said firmly. He's trying to cut me out of your lives, and you're letting him. A flash of guilt crossed her face, quickly replaced by defensiveness. You don't understand the pressure we're under. Blue Harbor expects parent involvement. There are social obligations, the twins' schedules will be packed with enrichment activities. And there's no room for their grandmother who loves them just as they are? Who doesn't care if they get into the right preschool or make the right connections? Eleanor sighed heavily. Mom, please. Can we not do this now? In her eyes, I saw a shadow of the little girl who had once clung to me after nightmares, who had wept on my shoulder after her first heartbreak, who had turned to me for every important decision in her life. That girl was still there, somewhere beneath the polished exterior Richard preferred. But she was buried deep. Just answer one question, I said. Are you happy, Eleanor? Truly happy? She blinked rapidly, and for a moment, I thought she might break through whatever hold Richard had over her. But then her expression hardened. I have everything I've ever wanted, she replied, her voice flat. A beautiful home, healthy children, a successful husband. Why wouldn't I be happy? It wasn't an answer to my question, not really, but it told me everything I needed to know. I love you, I said simply. I always will, no matter what. Please remember that. As I drove home that evening, my heart felt heavier than it had since Theodore's death. I had lost my daughter in a different way, not to death, but to a life that had no meaningful place for me. And my grandchildren were being directed down, a path that valued status over joy, achievement over kindness. The decision I had made about the college funds no longer felt like a reactive measure. It felt like the right thing to do. Those funds would now help students who truly needed support, who wouldn't take educational opportunities for granted, who might go on to create lives guided by gratitude rather than entitlement. When I arrived home, there was a message waiting on my answering machine. Mom, it's me. Eleanor's voice sounded strained. Richard mentioned you two had a conversation at the party. I just want you to understand that we're not trying to hurt you. We just need to do what's best for the twins right now. I hope you can respect that. Call me when you can. I deleted the message without returning the call. Instead, I sat down at my desk and began drafting a letter, one that I would not send yet, but that would explain my decision regarding the college funds when the time was right. Dearest Eleanor, I wrote, by the time you read this, you will likely be angry with me. You may feel I've betrayed you or the twins, but I want you to know that every decision I've made has been guided by love, including the difficult ones. I continued writing late into the night, pouring out decades of hopes, fears, and wisdom gained through hardship. When I finished, I sealed the letter in an envelope and placed it in my safe, alongside the documents for the Theodore Nightingale Literary Foundation. The following morning, I opened my bookshop as usual. Mrs. Calloway noticed my subdued mood, but didn't pry. Around noon, the bell above the door chimed, and I looked up to see Richard's mother standing awkwardly among the shelves. "Ophelia," she said, her voice lacking its usual condescension. "Do you have a moment to talk?" I gestured to the small seating area where I hosted children's story time. Of course. She perched on the edge of a colorful armchair, looking out of place in her expensive suit. "Richard told us about your disagreement yesterday." "Did he?" I kept my tone neutral. "Yes. He seems to think you're interfering with their parenting decisions." I folded my hands in my lap. "Is that why you're here? To tell me to stay away from my grandchildren?" She had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Not exactly. I'm here because I recognized something in your face yesterday. Something I've felt myself." That caught me by surprise. "What do you mean?" She sighed, suddenly looking older than her carefully maintained appearance usually allowed. "Richard has always been strong-willed, determined to achieve certain standards. When he was growing up, his father and I encouraged that. We thought we were preparing him for success." I waited, sensing there was more. "But the truth is," she continued, "we created a man who's never satisfied. Nothing is ever good enough. Not his accomplishments, not his possessions, not even his children." She met my eyes directly. "And certainly not his wife or her family." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked quietly. "Because I saw how he spoke to you yesterday. How he looks at Eleanor when she disagrees with him. And She hesitated. "I'm concerned." This vulnerability from a woman who had always presented herself as perfect was startling. "Concerned about what, exactly?" "About the twins. Growing up like Richard, never feeling they're enough. About Eleanor losing herself trying to meet impossible standards." She paused, then added softly, "About you being pushed out of their lives when they clearly adore you." I studied her face, looking for signs of insincerity, but found none. "What do you suggest I do? Richard has made it clear I'm not welcome." "That's why I'm here. Richard and his father are leaving for a golf weekend tomorrow. Eleanor will be alone with the twins. Perhaps that would be a good time for you two to really talk, without Richard's influence." I considered her words carefully. "Why this sudden concern? You've never seemed particularly interested in my relationship with Eleanor before." Richard's mother looked down at her hands. "Because I made mistakes with my son. I see that now. And watching history repeat itself with those beautiful children." She shook her head. "Some regrets come too late to fix, but perhaps yours don't have to." After she left, I sat for a long time, contemplating her visit. Could it be a trap? A way to prove I wouldn't respect Richard's boundaries? Or was it a genuine moment of connection between two grandmothers concerned about the same children? I decided it didn't matter. Eleanor was my daughter. The twins were my grandchildren. I would not be erased from their lives without a fight, not for my sake, but for theirs. The next day, I woke with a sense of resolve I hadn't felt in years. If Eleanor would be alone with the twins, this might be my only opportunity to speak freely, without Richard's controlling presence hovering over us. I dressed carefully, choosing a soft blue cardigan Eleanor had given me for Christmas 2 years ago. I baked a batch of cinnamon rolls, the twins' favorite, and placed them in a wicker basket covered with a checkered cloth. As I drove to their suburban home, doubts crept in. What if Eleanor refused to see me? What if Richard hadn't actually left for his golf weekend? What if this was just his mother's misguided attempt at family reconciliation? No, I decided. Even if all those things were true, I needed to try. For Eleanor, for the twins, for the family we once were, and might still be. I parked on the street rather than in the driveway, less confrontational that way, and approached the front door with measured steps. Before I could ring the bell, I heard laughter from the backyard, the unmistakable giggles of Lily and Lucas. Following the sound, I walked around the side of the house. The gate to the backyard was unlatched, and I slipped through quietly. The scene before me made my heart swell. Eleanor was chasing the twins through the sprinkler, all three of them soaking wet and laughing without restraint. For a moment, I simply watched, savoring the rare sight of my daughter free from Richard's expectations. Lucas spotted me first. "Grandma!" he shouted, breaking away from the game and running toward me, water droplets flying from his hair. Eleanor spun around, her smile faltering slightly when she saw me. But she didn't look angry, just surprised. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I brought cinnamon rolls," I said, holding up the basket, "and I thought we might talk." Lily had reached me by then, wrapping her damp arms around my legs. "Are those the special ones with extra frosting?" I laughed, patting her head. "Of course they are. Would I bring any other kind?" Eleanor turned off the sprinkler and grabbed 3 towels from a nearby chair. "Kids, go dry off on the porch while I talk to Grandma." The twins reluctantly obeyed, casting longing glances at the basket of treats as they trudged toward the house. When they were out of earshot, Eleanor crossed her arms, water still dripping from her clothes. "Richard wouldn't like you being here." "I know," I acknowledged. "But Richard isn't here, is he?" She sighed, running a hand through her wet hair. "No, he's not. But that doesn't mean—" "Eleanor," I interrupted gently. "When was the last time I saw you laugh like that? Really laugh without worrying about what someone might think?" Her expression softened slightly. "Mom, I'm not here to cause problems. I just want to talk. Mother to daughter. No agenda, no accusations. Just talk." She hesitated, then nodded toward the house. "Let me get the kids settled with those cinnamon rolls, and then we can sit on the porch." I waited in one of the wicker chairs on the wraparound porch, listening to the muffled sounds of Eleanor, helping the twins change into dry clothes. A few minutes later, she emerged in fresh attire, her hair tied back in a damp ponytail. She sat across from me, looking younger somehow, more like the daughter I remembered. "The kids are eating in the kitchen. We have maybe 20 minutes before they finish and come looking for you." "I'll be brief then," I said. "Eleanor, what happened at the birthday party?" "Richard told me," she cut in. "He said you were challenging his parenting decisions again." I took a deep breath. "Is that how you see it too? As me challenging your decisions?" She looked away. "Sometimes you do undermine us. The ice cream before dinner, letting them stay up late when you babysit." "Those are grandparent privileges," I said with a small smile. "But I've never contradicted any important rules you've set. I've never done anything to harm those children." "No one's saying you have," Eleanor replied quickly. "Aren't they? Richard told me I'm not welcome anymore, that my outdated ideas have no place in the twins' education, that I'm not part of the vision you two have for their future." I leaned forward. "Is that how you feel too?" Eleanor fidgeted with the hem of her shirt. "It's complicated, Mom. Richard has certain expectations for the twins, for our family. Blue Harbor is just the beginning. There's Westridge Prep after that, then the right university, the right connections. And where is happiness in this grand plan? Joy? Love? When do Lily and Lucas get to be children instead of projects?" Her eyes flashed with a hint of the spirit I remembered. "They're happy. We provide everything they need." "Do you?" I asked softly. Lucas told me yesterday he wanted a dinosaur cake for his birthday. A simple wish from a 4-year-old boy. Instead, he got a cake with his future school's logo. Does that sound like a child whose simple desires are being met? Eleanor flinched as if I'd struck her. That was Richard's idea. The headmaster was at the party, and he thought appearances were more important than his son's. Happiness, I finished for her. And you went along with it. You don't understand, she said, her voice rising slightly. Richard wants the best for them, the best schools, the best opportunities. The best according to whom? I interrupted. Richard? His parents? The society pages? What about what's best for Lucas and Lily as individuals, with their own personalities and wishes? Eleanor stood abruptly, pacing the length of the porch. Why are you doing this? Coming here when Richard's away? Criticizing our choices? I remained seated, keeping my voice calm. I'm here because I love you, because I raised you to think for yourself, to value your own happiness, not just how things appear to others. And I'm worried you've forgotten that. She stopped pacing, her back to me. Richard takes care of us. He provides a beautiful home, financial security. And in exchange, what does he require from you, Eleanor? Her shoulders tensed. Loyalty, support for his decisions. Obedience, I corrected gently. Compliance, the sacrifice of your own judgment. She turned to face me, tears forming in her eyes. You make it sound so terrible. It's not. He loves us. Does he love you? I asked, rising to stand before her. Or does he love what you represent? The perfect wife, the perfect children, the perfect family to showcase at country club parties? That's not fair, she whispered, but I could see my words had struck a chord. Let me ask you something, I continued. If you disagreed with Richard about something important, truly disagreed, what would happen? Eleanor wiped at her eyes. We'd discuss it. Come to a compromise. When has that ever happened? When have your wishes ever prevailed over his? She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. The Eleanor I raised was strong-willed, passionate, full of ideas and dreams. The woman I see now is afraid to let her children have a dinosaur cake on their birthday because it might displease her husband. You don't know what it's like, she said, her voice breaking. When Richard gets angry, when things aren't perfect, he can be so cold, so distant. The twins need stability. They need their father to be happy. My heart ached for her. So, you walk on eggshells. You defer to his judgment. You allow him to cut me out of your lives because it's easier than standing up to him. It's not like that, she protested weakly. Isn't it? His mother seems to think so. Eleanor's head snapped up. What? Margaret came to see me yesterday. She's worried about all of you, about Richard becoming his father, about the twins. Growing up thinking nothing they do is ever good enough. About you losing yourself trying to meet impossible standards. She went to see you? Eleanor sounded incredulous. Behind Richard's back? I nodded. She recognizes the patterns because she helped create them, and she regrets it. Eleanor sank back into her chair, looking stunned. I don't understand. She's always supported Richard in everything. Always taken his side. Perhaps she's finally seen where that road leads. I sat beside her, taking her hand in mine. Eleanor, I'm not asking you to choose between your husband and your mother. I'm asking you to choose yourself, to remember who you are, what you believe in, to be the mother those children deserve, one who protects their right to be children, to have joy, to feel unconditionally loved. She squeezed my hand, tears flowing freely now. I don't know how, she whispered. I've been trying to be what he wants for so long. I'm not sure I remember how to be anything else. Before I could respond, the screen door creaked open, and Lily stuck her head out. Mommy? Are you crying? Eleanor quickly wiped her face. No, sweetheart. Mommy's fine. Why don't you and Lucas bring your coloring books out here? You can show Grandma your drawings. The next hour passed in a blessed bubble of normalcy. The twins showed me their artwork, told me about their friends, and begged for stories about when their mother was a little girl. Eleanor gradually relaxed, laughing at my tales of her childhood misadventures, adding details I'd forgotten. For a brief, precious time, we were simply a family enjoying each other's company. No pressure, no performance, no Richard. As the afternoon waned, I knew I needed to address one more critical matter. While the twins were distracted with a game of hide-and-seek in the garden, I turned to Eleanor. "There's something else we need to discuss," I began carefully. "Something important." She tensed immediately. "What is it?" "The college funds for the twins." Her expression softened. "Mom, you don't need to worry about that. Richard has set up accounts for them. His parents have contributed too." "I'm sure they have," I said, "but there's something you should know. I've made some changes to the funds I established." "Changes?" She frowned. "What kind of changes?" I took a deep breath. "I've redirected those funds to establish the Theodore Nightingale Literary Foundation. It will provide scholarships to deserving students from underprivileged backgrounds." Eleanor stared at me in disbelief. "You what? Mom? Those accounts had nearly $400,000, I finished for her. "Yes, it was quite a substantial sum. But why? Those were for Lily and Lucas's education. And now they'll help other children who don't have wealthy grandparents or trust funds waiting for them." Eleanor stood abruptly. "I can't believe you would do this. Those were their future." "No," I said firmly. "Those were a backup plan. A safety net I created because that's what I've always done. Prepared for the unexpected, provided security for my family." I met her gaze steadily. "But when Richard made it clear I wasn't welcome in your lives anymore, I had to reconsider what that meant for my financial responsibilities as well." "So this is what? Punishment? Revenge because Richard hurt your feelings?" I shook my head. "It's a consequence, Eleanor. If I'm not family enough to be welcome in your home, then perhaps my money isn't family money either." Her face flushed with anger. "You can't just take back a gift like that. Those funds were for the twins." "They weren't gifts yet," I explained calmly. "They were accounts in my name, intended for their future use. I never signed them over or made them irrevocable. Legally, they remained my money to allocate as I saw fit." "Richard will be furious," she whispered, looking suddenly afraid. "I imagine he will," I agreed. "And that's precisely why I'm telling you now, while he's away. So you have time to process this, to decide how you want to handle it." "What do you mean?" "I mean that this decision, like my reduced role in your lives, doesn't have to be permanent. Both can be reconsidered, depending on how we move forward from here." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "You're giving me a choice." "I'm giving us all a choice," I corrected gently. "Richard can choose to welcome me back into your family life, treating me with the respect a grandmother deserves. You can choose to stand up for yourself and your children, to reclaim your voice in your marriage. And I can choose to restore those funds if our family relationship is restored." "That's manipulation," she said, but there was uncertainty in her voice. "No, dear, it's boundaries. It's me refusing to be used for financial security while being pushed aside emotionally. It's refusing to be the bank, but not the grandmother." Eleanor sank back into her chair, looking overwhelmed. "I don't know what to do." "You don't have to decide anything right now," I assured her. "But I want you to think about something. If the money is what upsets you most about this situation, not the fact that your husband is cutting your mother out of your children's lives, then perhaps that's something worth examining." She was quiet for a long moment. "It's not just the money," she finally admitted. "It's knowing that Richard will blame me for this, That he'll say I should have controlled you better, kept you in line. My heart broke a little at her words. Is that how he speaks to you? About controlling people, keeping them in line? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Eleanor, I said softly, that's not how healthy marriages work. That's not love. That's control. He wasn't always like this, she whispered. When we were first married, he was different. Or maybe I was different, more willing to adapt, to compromise. And now? She looked toward the garden where the twins were playing. Now I'm tired of walking on eggshells, tired of pretending everything is perfect when it isn't. But I'm trapped, Mom. The twins need stability. They need their father. They need a mother who isn't afraid in her own home, I said firmly. They need to see that love doesn't mean surrendering your identity, your voice. Eleanor wiped away a fresh tear. What am I supposed to do? Leave him? Become a single mother at 40? Start over with nothing? You wouldn't have nothing, I reminded her. You'd have me. You'd have your education, your skills, your strength, which is far greater than you remember, and you'd have your children. Growing up in a home where their mother is respected, where they learn what healthy love looks like. The screen door banged open, and the twins burst onto the porch, breathless from their game. Grandma, stay for dinner, Lucas pleaded, climbing into my lap. Please? We can make spaghetti like we used to. Lily nodded enthusiastically. With the special sauce and garlic bread. I looked at Eleanor, leaving the decision to her. She hesitated only briefly. That sounds wonderful. Grandma taught me how to make that sauce, you know. Maybe it's time I learned to make it myself. The significance of her words wasn't lost on me. A small step, perhaps, but in the right direction. Eleanor reclaiming a piece of her heritage, her identity separate from Richard's influence. As we moved into the kitchen, the twins chattering excitedly about their cooking duties, Eleanor touched my arm. This doesn't mean I've decided anything, she said quietly. About Richard. About us. I need time to think. I understand, I replied. But remember, you don't have to face this alone. Whatever you decide, I'm here. For the first time in years, I saw a flicker of my real daughter in her eyes. Determined, thoughtful, brave. I know, Mom. You always have been. We spent the evening cooking together, flour dusting our clothes, laughter filling the kitchen that had probably rarely heard such genuine joy. Eleanor relaxed visibly as the hours passed, becoming more animated, more herself. The twins reveled in the informal atmosphere, helping to stir the sauce, arranging the garlic bread on baking sheets, setting the table with mismatched napkins and their special occasion cups. It was nearly 8 o'clock when Eleanor's phone chimed with a text message. Her smile vanished as she read it. Richard's on his way home, she said, tension instantly returning to her shoulders. His father wasn't feeling well, so they cut the trip short. The happy bubble burst. Lily and Lucas sensed the shift in mood, their own expressions growing subdued. Is Daddy mad? Lily asked in a small voice. The question, and the fact that it was the first thing the child thought to ask, spoke volumes. Eleanor forced a bright smile. No, sweetheart. Grandpa just wasn't feeling up to golfing anymore. But Daddy will be home soon, so let's get this kitchen cleaned up. The twins began clearing the table with practiced efficiency, clearly accustomed to preparing for Richard's return. I began gathering my things. I should go, I said quietly to Eleanor. It would be better if I'm not here when he arrives. She nodded, relief and regret mingling in her expression. Thank you for today. For everything. I just need time. Take all the time you need, I assured her, hugging her tightly. Just remember who you are, who you've always been. I said my goodbyes to the twins, promising to see them again soon, though we all knew that promise might be difficult to keep. As I walked to my car, I glanced back at the house, at the perfectly manicured lawn, the expensive facade, the carefully coordinated decor visible through the windows, the image of domestic perfection Richard had constructed. But now I had seen behind that facade. I had glimpsed the fear, the control, the silent unhappiness. And I had planted a seed, not just of doubt, but of possibility. The possibility that Eleanor could reclaim herself, that the twins could grow up with joy rather than just achievement, that our family could heal. Whether that seed would take root remained to be seen. The next morning, I opened the bookshop as usual, though my mind was elsewhere. Would Richard notice the change in Eleanor? Would she tell him about our conversation, about the college funds? Would he lash out, tightening his control even further? Around noon, the bell above the door chimed, and Richard himself walked in. My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral as he approached the counter. "Ophelia," he said coldly, "we need to talk." I nodded toward the back room. My office would be more private. He followed me silently, his expensive shoes clicking on the hardwood floor. Once inside, I closed the door and turned to face him. "I assume Eleanor told you about our conversation yesterday," I began, seeing no point in pretense. "She told me everything," he confirmed, his jaw tight with anger. "Your uninvited visit, your attempts to turn her against me, and your spiteful decision about the college funds. Is that how she described it? As spite?" He ignored my question. "I want those funds restored. Immediately." I sat down behind my desk, motioning for him to take the chair opposite. He remained standing, looming over me in what I recognized as an attempt at intimidation. "Please sit, Richard. This will be a lengthy conversation, and I prefer we be on equal footing." For a moment, I thought he might refuse, but then he sank into the chair, his posture rigid. "The funds," he repeated. "I want them restored today." "That's not going to happen," I said calmly. "At least not under the current circumstances." His eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I've reconsidered my financial commitments to a family that no longer welcomes my presence. A perfectly reasonable adjustment. I think you'll agree." "This is about the birthday party," he said dismissively. "You're overreacting because I set some basic boundaries. Telling me I'm not welcome in my grandchildren's lives goes well. Beyond basic boundaries, Richard, it's a complete severing of family ties. And if that's your choice, then I respect it. But such choices have natural consequences." He leaned forward, his expression darkening. "Listen carefully, Ophelia. Those funds represent the twins' future, their education, their opportunities. You're punishing innocent children because of a petty disagreement with me." "Lily and Lucas will be fine," I replied. "They have you and your parents' money after all. You've made it clear that's the important thing. The right schools, the right connections. I'm sure you've planned for every contingency." "This isn't about my money," he snapped. "It's about principle. Those funds were promised to the twins." "Were they?" "I don't recall signing any documents to that effect. I established those accounts privately with the intention of helping my grandchildren someday. But intentions can change when circumstances change." Richard's face flushed with anger. "You can't do this." "I already have," I said simply. "The Theodore Nightingale Literary Foundation was officially established 3 days ago. The funds have been transferred. It's done." For a moment, I thought he might actually strike me. His hands gripped the edge of my desk, knuckles white with strain. "You've made a serious mistake," he said, his voice dangerously low. "I won't forget this." "I hope you don't," I replied evenly. "In fact, I hope you think about it every time you consider keeping me from my grandchildren. Every time you dismiss Eleanor's opinions, every time you prioritize appearances over genuine happiness." He stood abruptly. "I could fight this legally, contest the transfer. You could try, I acknowledged, but the money was always legally mine. The accounts were in my name. I have excellent documentation, and frankly, any legal battle would only expose your true nature more thoroughly. I smiled slightly. Besides, imagine the gossip at the country club if it became known you were suing your wife's elderly mother over money. That struck home. Richard was nothing if not conscious of appearances. "What do you want?" he asked bluntly. "What would it take to restore those funds?" I rose to meet his gaze directly. A genuine change in our family dynamic, respect for my role as the twins' grandmother, acknowledgement of Eleanor's voice and autonomy in your marriage. And most importantly, a commitment to letting Lily and Lucas enjoy their childhood, including dinosaur birthday cakes when requested. He scoffed. "You're asking me to fundamentally change how I raise my family, how I run my household, over what amounts to emotional blackmail. I'm asking you to consider whether your vision for your family is actually making any of you happy," I corrected. "And I'm providing a meaningful incentive for that reflection. And if I refuse, then the foundation will continue its work, helping deserving students who might otherwise never have the chance at higher education. A worthy cause, I think you'll agree." Richard studied me with new eyes, calculating, reassessing. I could almost see him realizing that the quiet bookshop owner he had dismissed for years had teeth after all. "I'll discuss this with Eleanor," he said finally. "We'll need time to consider our options." "Take all the time you need," I replied. "The Foundation's first scholarships won't be awarded until next fall. There's plenty of time for reflection before then." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "You know, my mother warned me about you. Said you weren't as meek as you appeared." "Margaret is more perceptive than I realized," I said mildly. "Perhaps you should listen to her more often." After he left, I sat quietly in my office, processing what had just occurred. I had stood my ground against Richard for the first time, not with emotional pleas or passive acceptance, but with concrete action that had actually gotten his attention. For once, I had leverage in our family dynamic. But leverage wasn't the goal. Healing was. Richard clearly saw this as a battle to be won, a challenge to his authority. I needed to help him see it as an opportunity for growth, for genuine connection. More importantly, I needed to support Eleanor as she navigated this new terrain. Standing up to Richard, even indirectly through me, would not be easy for her. She would face his displeasure, his cold withdrawal, perhaps even his anger. She would need strength, and right now, her reserves were depleted from years of emotional compliance. I picked up the phone and dialed Margaret Harrington's number. "It's Ophelia," I said when she answered. "Richard just left my shop. I think Eleanor may need some support in the coming days." Margaret sighed heavily. "He came home early from the golf trip in a foul mood. I should have known something was brewing." "What happened?" I explained briefly about my visit with Eleanor, Richard's confrontation at the bookshop, and my position regarding the college funds. "Well," she said when I finished, "you've certainly gotten his attention. I've never seen anyone successfully back Richard into a corner before." "That wasn't my intention," I clarified. "I just want what's best for Eleanor and the twins." "I know," she said quietly. "So do I. Finally." There was a pause, then she added, "I'll check on Eleanor today. Make sure Richard isn't difficult." The delicate way she phrased it confirmed my suspicions about Richard's behavior behind closed doors. Not physically abusive, perhaps, but emotionally controlling, manipulative, coldly punishing when crossed. "Thank you," I said. "And Margaret? Thank you for coming to me yesterday, for giving me the chance to speak with Eleanor alone. It meant more than you know." "It's the least I could do," she replied, her voice heavy with regret. "After all, I helped create this situation. It's time I helped fix it. After we hung up, I turned my attention to the bookshop. Work had always been my refuge, my constant during life's storms. Today would be no different. I organized a new display of classic children's literature, assisted customers with recommendations, and prepared for the afternoon story hour. But beneath the routine activities, my mind continued to work through scenarios, strategies, hopes for our family's future. The confrontation with Richard had been necessary, but it was only the beginning. The real work lay ahead, helping Eleanor find her voice, protecting the twins' childhood joy, and perhaps, just perhaps, guiding Richard toward a more genuine connection with his family. It wouldn't be easy. Richard wouldn't change overnight, if at all. Eleanor's journey to reclaim herself would be fraught with setbacks and doubt, and the twins were caught in the middle, absorbing every tension, every unspoken conflict. But for the first time in years, there was movement in a situation that had seemed hopelessly stagnant. Change had begun, for better or worse. As I settled into the reading circle chair for story hour, watching the children gather on the colorful rug before me, I thought of Lily and Lucas, of their bright, curious minds, their natural joy so at odds with Richard's rigid expectations. Of Eleanor's face when she laughed freely in the sprinkler, momentarily unburdened by performance anxiety. Whatever came next, I knew I had done the right thing. Some lessons couldn't be taught gently. Some wake-up calls required alarm bells, not whispers. I opened the storybook and began to read, my voice carrying through the quiet shop. Once upon a time, there was a family who had forgotten how to see each other, really see each other, until one day. The children leaned forward, eager for the tale to unfold, just as I was eager, hopeful, fearful, but resolved, to see how our own family's story would continue. 3 days passed without word from Eleanor or Richard. I kept my routine, opening the bookshop each morning, helping customers find their perfect reads, hosting afternoon story hours for the neighborhood children. But underneath this calm exterior, anxiety gnawed at me. Had I pushed too hard? Had Richard retaliated against Eleanor for my actions? Were the twins confused by the sudden tension? On the 4th morning, Margaret called. "Ophelia, are you free for lunch today?" Her tone gave nothing away, and I braced myself for bad news. "Yes, I can close the shop for an hour. Is everything all right?" "Not exactly," she said, "but better than you might think. Can you meet me at Rosemary Cafe at noon?" I agreed, then spent the morning distracted, fumbling book recommendations and misplacing orders. Mrs. Calloway finally shooed me toward the door at 11:45. "Go on," she insisted. "Whatever's bothering you won't get better with you pacing holes in my floor. I can handle things here." The Rosemary Cafe was a small, elegant establishment tucked between a boutique and an antique shop downtown. Not Richard's usual style. He preferred places with Michelin stars and sommelier service, which made Margaret's choice interesting. She was already seated at a corner table when I arrived, stirring a cup of tea with precise motions. As I approached, I noticed how much older she looked without her usual perfect makeup and styled hair. Today, her face was almost bare, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a simple clip. "Thank you for coming," she said, gesturing to the chair opposite her. "I thought it might be better to talk in person." I sat down, declining the server's offer of a menu with a shake of my head. "Just tea, please." When we were alone again, I turned to Margaret. "What's happened?" She sighed, setting down her spoon with a small clink against the saucer. "Richard and Eleanor had quite the confrontation after he returned from your shop. I've never heard Eleanor raise her voice to him before." My stomach tightened. "Is she all right?" "Physically, yes," Margaret said quickly. "But it was intense. Richard demanded she convince you to restore the college funds. Eleanor refused." I couldn't hide my surprise. "She refused him? Directly?" Margaret nodded, a hint of pride in her expression. She told him she couldn't control you, and furthermore, she understood why you'd made that decision. Said it was a natural consequence of how he'd treated you. Using his own language against him, I murmured. Clever. He didn't take it. Well, Margaret continued, accused her of conspiring with you, of undermining his authority. He tried every angle. Guilt, intimidation, cold withdrawal. But Eleanor? She's changed, Ophelia. Something broke loose in her that day you visited. She stood her ground. Relief and worry battled within me. What happened then? Richard stormed out, spent the night at our house, came back the next morning expecting Eleanor to have caved overnight. But she hadn't. Margaret leaned forward, lowering her voice. She presented him with a list of conditions. Conditions? I echoed, scarcely believing what I was hearing. For continuing their marriage, Margaret clarified. She told him either things change, or she would leave him and seek full custody of the twins. I sat back, stunned. The Eleanor I'd spoken with just days ago had seemed trapped, uncertain. To make such a dramatic stand so quickly was unexpected and concerning. Isn't that escalating things rather fast? I worry about backlash. Margaret's expression grew somber. It might seem sudden to you, but this has been building for years. Your visit, the conversation about the college funds, that was just the catalyst. The final push she needed. She paused, wrapping her thin fingers around her teacup. You should know that I've been having quiet conversations with Eleanor for months now. Small moments when Richard wasn't around, trying to undo some of the damage I helped create. This revelation shifted my understanding entirely. You've been preparing her. She nodded, trying to, in my own inadequate way. Sharing things I wish I'd known when John, Richard's father, was controlling our lives the same way. History repeating itself in the worst possible way. Her eyes met mine directly. I failed my son, Ophelia. I raised him to be just like his father. But I refused to fail my grandchildren the same way. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. What were Eleanor's conditions? First, family therapy, for all of them. Second, she wants to return to work. She's already contacted her old firm. Third, you are to be welcomed back into their lives with regular visits and no interference. Fourth, the twins will continue at Blue Harbor for now, but decisions about their future education will be made jointly, with their individual interests considered. And Richard agreed to all that? I asked skeptically. Margaret gave a thin smile. Not initially. The work situation is still being negotiated. He thinks part-time would be more appropriate. She rolled her eyes at this. And the foundation? I nodded toward my bag where the paperwork waited. Eleanor sighed. That's complicated. I understand. Why you did it, Mom. I really do. And part of me even admires the decisiveness of it. She gave a wry smile. Maybe that's where I get it from. The funds can be restored, I reminded her. That was always part of the equation. Not as blackmail, but as a natural restoration if family relationships improved. I know, but I've been thinking about it differently now. She hesitated. The foundation. It does good work, doesn't it? Helps students who really need it? It will, I confirmed. The first scholarships won't be awarded until next fall, but we've already established the criteria, set up the administration. It's real. Eleanor was quiet for a moment, thoughtful. What if we kept half for the foundation and restored half for the twins? Not because Richard demands it, but because it represents both aspects of our family values, privilege and responsibility. I studied my daughter with new appreciation. That's a remarkably balanced approach, Eleanor. I learned from the best, she said with a small smile. You always taught me that wealth carries obligation, to help others, to make a difference. Maybe this is how the twins learned that lesson too. Before I could respond, the oven timer dinged, and the children came racing back into the kitchen, eager for their creative dinners. The conversation paused as we served the pizzas, settled everyone at the table, and admired each other's culinary creations. Dinner was a joyful affair, with none of the tension that had characterized family meals in Richard's presence. The twins told elaborate stories, interrupted each other, laughed with their mouths full, all behaviors that would have earned stern corrections before. Eleanor didn't enforce perfect table manners, only basic courtesy, allowing the natural exuberance of childhood to flourish. After dinner, as the twins showed me their latest art projects in the living room, Eleanor's phone chimed with a text message. Her expression tightened as she read it. "Richard?" I guessed. She nodded. "He's coming home earlier than expected. Says he wants to talk to you." "I can leave if that would be easier," I offered, though the thought of retreating now felt wrong. "No," Eleanor said firmly. "This is exactly the boundary I'm setting. You belong here. He needs to accept that." Within 20 minutes, we heard the garage door opening. The twins, now engaged in a board game with me, barely reacted. Another, telling sign of Richard's emotional distance from them. Eleanor straightened her posture, but continued helping Lucas count spaces on the game board. Richard entered through the kitchen, appearing momentarily startled by the domestic scene before him. He was impeccably dressed as always, not a hair out of place despite the long workday. His eyes found me immediately, narrowing slightly. "Ophelia," he said stiffly, "I didn't realize you'd be here." "Mom brought new books for the kids," Eleanor replied before I could speak. "And she's staying for game night. We've missed her." Richard's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I see. Well, don't let me interrupt. I have some work calls to make." He turned to leave without greeting the twins. "Richard," Eleanor called after him, "the children haven't seen you all day. Perhaps you could join us for just one game before your calls." It was a subtle challenge, and everyone in the room felt it. Richard hesitated, clearly torn between maintaining his emotional withdrawal and preserving the appearance of being a devoted father. "Please, Daddy," Lily asked, her small voice sounding uncertain. "You can be the blue piece. I saved it for you." Something flickered across Richard's face. Surprise, perhaps, at being directly invited, or guilt at the realization that his daughter had thoughtfully reserved his favorite game piece despite his absence. "I suppose I could play one round," he conceded, setting his briefcase aside. He lowered himself stiffly into an armchair near the game board, accepting the blue game piece from Lily with awkward formality. As the game progressed, Richard remained rigid, his competitive nature emerging in how seriously he took each move. But the twins seemed pleased to have him participate, and Eleanor maintained a calm, pleasant demeanor throughout. When the game ended, with Lucas the unlikely victor, Richard stood and straightened his jacket. "I need to speak with your grandmother privately," he told the twins. "Why don't you two get ready for bed? I'll come up for goodnight stories later." Eleanor gave me a questioning look, and I nodded reassuringly. "It's fine. We do need to talk." "We'll be upstairs then," she said, ushering the children toward the staircase. "Mom, you'll say goodbye before you leave?" "Of course, dear." When they were gone, Richard gestured toward his home office. "Shall we?" I followed him into the meticulously organized room, noting the absence of personal touches. No family photos, children's drawings, or mementos. Just awards, credentials, and expensive art selected to impress clients. He closed the door and motioned for me to sit in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "Eleanor tells me you've brought the foundation paperwork," he began, seating himself behind the imposing desk. "I have," I confirmed, "though I'm curious why you're interested in seeing it." I want to understand exactly what you've done with my children's money, he replied, his tone carefully controlled. Not their money, Richard. My money, allocated for a specific purpose. I removed the folder from my bag and placed it on his desk. But yes, I'm happy to be transparent about where it's gone. He opened the folder and began scanning the documents, his banker's eye noting every detail. This is actually quite professionally structured, he admitted reluctantly. Good investment strategy, reasonable administrative costs, clear selection criteria. I may be just a bookshop owner, but I've been managing my own finances successfully. For decades, I reminded him. Theodore was an economics professor, after all. I learned a great deal from him. He tried to negotiate, to water down the terms. But Eleanor had one final condition that gave him pause. What was that? If he refused, she would tell everyone, his colleagues, his clients, the country club set, exactly why their marriage was ending, including his attempts to cut you out of the twins' lives after you'd financially supported them for years. I couldn't help but laugh softly. She threatened his reputation. The one thing he values above all else. Precisely. Margaret sipped her tea. He's still processing it all, but he's agreed in principle. Whether he follows through remains to be seen. And the twins? How are they handling this tension? Margaret's expression softened. Better than you might expect. Richard has always been performative with them, more concerned with how they appear than how they feel. They've never had the easy rapport with him that they have with you or Eleanor, so his emotional withdrawal isn't as noticeable to them. And Eleanor? How is she really? Scared, Margaret admitted. Exhilarated, overwhelmed, but mostly determined. She's found her voice again. Ophelia, your daughter is back. Tears pricked at my eyes, and I blinked them away. I want to see her, to help her through this. That's partly why I asked you. Here, Margaret said. Eleanor wants you to come for dinner tonight. Richard will be working late. Deliberately, I suspect, to avoid the situation. But she wants the twins to see you, and she needs your support. Of course, I agreed immediately. What time? 6 o'clock, and Ophelia. She hesitated. Bring the foundation paperwork with you. Eleanor has questions. That evening, I arrived at Eleanor's home with a folder containing all the documents related to the Theodore Nightingale Literary Foundation, as well as a small bag of children's books I'd selected specifically for the twins. As I approached the front door, I heard laughter from inside. Bright, uninhibited, joyful. Eleanor answered my knock with Lily perched on her hip, her hair tied back in a messy ponytail, wearing jeans and a faded university sweatshirt instead of her usual carefully coordinated outfits. Mom, she said, her smile genuine if tired around the edges. Come in. We're making pizza. The kitchen looked like a flour bomb had exploded in it. Lucas stood on a chair at the counter, enthusiastically kneading a lump of dough, his entire, front dusted white. Bowls of toppings, some conventional, some decidedly creative, covered every available surface. Grandma! Lucas shouted when he spotted me. I'm making a dinosaur pizza, with extra cheese meteors. That sounds delicious, I replied, setting my bags down and removing my coat. Can I help? For the next hour, we created culinary monstrosities, together. Lucas's dinosaur pizza featured pepperoni spikes down its back. Lily insisted her pizza needed to be a rainbow, so we arranged vegetables in colorful arcs across the dough. Eleanor made a more traditional margarita, while I opted for an owl design that made the twins giggle. Throughout the chaos, I watched Eleanor closely. She seemed lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She laughed freely, got sauce on her clothes without fretting, and didn't once glance at the clock or mention Richard's standards. When the pizzas were finally in the oven, the twins ran off to wash up, leaving Eleanor and me alone in the disaster zone of a kitchen. They seem happy, I observed, wiping flour from the counter. Eleanor nodded, leaning against the refrigerator. They are. Confused about why Daddy's so busy suddenly, but not particularly bothered by it. She gave a sad smile. That probably says something, doesn't it? Children are resilient, I said, and perceptive. They sense when things are genuinely warm and when they're just for show. Eleanor began loading dishes into the dishwasher. Margaret told you about my ultimatum to Richard? She did. I must say, I'm surprised by how quickly you took such a definitive stand. Eleanor paused, a sauce-smeared bowl in her hands. It wasn't as sudden as it seems. I've been awakening. I guess you could say, for months now. Little realizations, small moments of clarity. Margaret has been helping, in her way. She mentioned that, I said, passing her another bowl. She feels responsible for how Richard turned out. She should, Eleanor said bluntly. She enabled John's controlling behavior for decades, taught Richard that was normal. Her expression softened. But she's trying to make amends now. Better late than never, I suppose. And you? Are you sure about this path you've chosen? It won't be easy. She set the bowl down and faced me directly. Nothing worth doing ever is, right? Isn't that what you always told me? She took a deep breath. The day after you visited, when Richard confronted me about the college funds, something inside me just snapped. I saw so clearly what our life had become, this carefully constructed facade with nothing genuine beneath it. The twins growing more subdued by the day, me disappearing into this role of Richard's perfect wife. She shook her head. I don't want that legacy for Lily and Lucas. I don't want them growing up thinking love means control, that success means sacrificing joy. So what happens now? I asked gently. Now we see if Richard is capable of genuine change. She didn't sound particularly optimistic. He's agreed to family therapy starting next week. He's reluctantly accepted that you'll be back in our lives regularly. Richard continued reading, his frown deepening as he reached the mission statement. To provide educational opportunities for promising students from disadvantaged backgrounds, particularly those with interest in literature, education, and community service, he read aloud. Very noble, though I notice these are all fields unlikely to generate significant financial returns on educational investment. Not everything worthwhile can be measured in dollars, Richard. He looked up sharply. Easy for you to say when you're redirecting funds meant for your own grandchildren. Those funds were always meant to support values I believe in, I replied evenly. When it seemed those values weren't being honored in your home, when I was being systematically excluded despite years of support, I simply found another way to express those values. Richard leaned back in his chair, studying me with new intensity. Eleanor seems to think we should compromise, split the funds between the foundation and new accounts for the twins. She mentioned that possibility, yes. I think it's a reasonable solution. Do you? His tone was skeptical. Or is this just another hoop you're making us jump through? I met his gaze steadily. Richard, this was never about controlling you or punishing the twins. It was about establishing that I am not merely a convenient bank account to be used, when needed and dismissed when inconvenient. I am their grandmother, with a legitimate place in their lives. And now Eleanor has issued her ultimatum. Family therapy, your regular involvement, her return to work. His expression was unreadable. Did you put her up to that as well? No, I said honestly. That was entirely her decision, one I respect enormously. He was quiet for a moment, tapping his fingers on the desk in a controlled rhythm. She's different now. More assertive. She's remembering who she is, I corrected gently. The strong, independent woman she was before your marriage became about maintaining appearances rather than nurturing genuine connection. Richard flinched slightly at this direct assessment. You make me sound like some kind of monster. Not a monster, I said carefully. A man who has confused control for love, achievement for worth. A man who has prioritized how things look over how they feel. But not a monster, Richard. Just someone who learned the wrong lessons too well. He stood abruptly, pacing behind his desk. I provide for this family. Everything I do, the schools, the neighborhood, the connections. It's all for their benefit, their future. Is it? I asked softly. Or is it for how it makes you appear to others? The successful architect with the perfect family, the gifted children destined for greatness? His pacing stopped. What's wrong with wanting success? For my children? Nothing. But success defined solely by external metrics, prestigious schools, lucrative careers, social standing. That's a hollow achievement if they're not also happy, kind, capable of genuine connection. Richard returned to his chair, tension evident, in every line of his body. And you think I'm incapable of providing that? I think you haven't prioritized it, I corrected, but that doesn't mean you can't learn. If you truly want to save your marriage, if you genuinely love your children beyond what they represent, then this is your opportunity to evolve. He stared at the foundation documents for a long moment. This family therapy, Eleanor insists, on, it won't be pleasant. Growth rarely is, I acknowledged, but consider the alternative. Do you really want to lose your family? To see your children only on designated weekends? To watch Eleanor rebuild a life without you? The question hung in the air between us. For the first time since I'd known him, Richard's carefully maintained facade seemed to crack, revealing a flash of genuine fear beneath. I don't know how to be different, he admitted quietly. This is how I was raised, how my father operated. It's all I know. Then learn, I said simply. Start by listening, really listening, to Eleanor, to the twins. Ask questions about what they want, what brings them joy, not just what accomplishes your goals for them. Watch how other fathers interact with their children at the park, not just at country club events. Richard straightened in his chair, his vulnerability quickly masked. And the foundation? What happens with that? I think Eleanor's compromise is wise, I said. Maintaining half the funds for scholarships teaches the twins about privilege and responsibility. The other half in their college accounts provides security while making clear that their future isn't solely defined by financial considerations. He nodded slowly. I can accept those terms, and the other conditions Eleanor has outlined. All of them? I pressed. Including my regular presence in your family life? Richard met my gaze directly. Yes, though I would appreciate guidance occasionally on how to navigate this new dynamic without constant friction. It was as close to an olive branch as I was likely to get from him. I think we can manage that. We spent the next half hour discussing practical details, the division of funds, visitation schedules, the upcoming therapy appointments. Throughout, Richard remained formal but not hostile, pragmatic rather than emotional. It wasn't a transformation, merely a beginning, but it was something. As our conversation concluded, he escorted me back to the living room. I should go say goodnight to the children, he said, glancing toward the stairs. You should, I agreed. And Richard? Try asking about their day before telling them about yours. It makes a difference. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face at the suggestion, but he nodded curtly before heading upstairs. Eleanor emerged from the kitchen, anxiety visible in her expression. Everything okay? You two were talking for quite a while. We've reached an understanding, I told her, gathering my belongings. About the foundation, about family dynamics. Going forward, it won't be easy, Eleanor. Richard is willing, but change doesn't come naturally to him. I know, she sighed. But he's trying. That's more than I expected, honestly. I hugged her tightly. I'm so proud of you. Standing up for yourself, for the twins. It took tremendous courage. She returned the embrace fiercely. I couldn't have done it without you, without knowing you were there, supporting me. You could have, I corrected her. You're stronger than you realize. Always have been. I pulled back, holding her at arm's length. But I'm glad you didn't have to. As I drove home that evening, streetlights casting intermittent shadows across my face, I reflected on the unexpected turns our family journey had taken. What had begun as a painful exclusion, a son-in-law declaring a grandmother unwelcome, had catalyzed a far more profound reckoning. Eleanor rediscovering her strength, the twins experiencing a more authentic family environment, Richard confronting the limitations of his controlling approach, Margaret attempting to right the wrongs of her parenting, and me, finding the courage to stand firm rather than accommodate harmful dynamics for the sake of peace. The college funds, that dramatic financial decision I'd made in a moment of clarity and resolve, had been merely a mechanism, a lever to shift an imbalanced system. The true value lay in what it had revealed, that genuine family bonds couldn't be dictated by financial control or social appearances. That love demanded respect, not compliance. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a small package leaning against my front door. Curious, I retrieved it before entering the house. Inside was a handmade bookmark, clearly crafted by children's hands, decorated with dinosaur stickers and rainbow colors. A note in Eleanor's handwriting accompanied it. Mom, the twins made this today when I told them about the special foundation you created to help children who need it. Lucas said it's for marking your place in the big, important books about helping people. Lily added the extra glitter, because helping should be sparkly. We love you. Thank you for showing us all what really matters. E. I traced my fingers over the uneven edges of the bookmark, the excessive glue still slightly tacky, the heartfelt imperfection of it all. This small token contained everything I had hoped to protect and nurture. Creativity, generosity, individual expression, family connection. Perhaps, I thought as I placed the bookmark carefully on my bedside table, this was the true beginning of our healing. Not the formal agreements or financial compromises, but this simple acknowledgement that we were building something new together, something authentic, messy, and infinitely more valuable than the perfect facade Richard had tried to maintain. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The family therapy would stir up difficult emotions. Richard's commitment would be tested repeatedly. Eleanor would face moments of doubt in her new assertiveness. The twins would need reassurance as family dynamics shifted. But tonight, I allowed myself to feel cautiously hopeful. The foundation, both literal and metaphorical, had been laid for something genuine to grow. And I would be there, invited, and welcomed to witness it unfold. 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of careful negotiations and tentative new patterns. The family attended their first therapy session, which Eleanor later described to me as painfully productive. Richard had remained stoic throughout, but had actually participated, which she considered a small victory. The twins, initially confused by the concept of talking to a stranger about family feelings, had warmed to Dr. Abernathy's gentle approach and her office full of therapeutic toys. I had settled into a regular visiting schedule, Wednesday afternoons and Sunday dinners with occasional spontaneous visits when Eleanor called needing support or simply company. Richard was civil during these interactions, sometimes even engaging in genuine conversation, though he often retreated to his office when emotions ran too close to the surface. Today was a milestone, the twins' first day at Blue Harbor Academy. I had been invited to join the drop-off, a concession from Richard that clearly cost him some pride. As I pulled into the visitor parking space, I spotted Eleanor standing near the entrance, looking polished but approachable in a simple dress and cardigan. The twins, adorably proper in their blue and gray uniforms, bounced with nervous energy beside her. Richard stood slightly apart, checking his watch, his expression betraying his impatience with the sentimental aspects of this educational transition. "Grandma," Lucas called when he spotted me, breaking away to run to my car. "You came." I embraced him warmly. "Of course I did. It's your big day." Lily followed more cautiously, glancing at her father before hugging me. This small gesture, her instinctive check for Richard's approval, reminded me how much work still lay ahead in freeing these children from the weight of excessive expectations. "Thank you for coming, Ophelia," Eleanor said, genuine gratitude in her voice. "It means a lot to have you here." Richard nodded stiffly in greeting. "We should head in. Orientation begins in 10 minutes. The school was as impressive as its reputation suggested. Manicured grounds, state-of-the-art facilities, teachers with impeccable credentials. As we toured the classrooms, I noticed the careful balance between academic rigor and creative expression. Perhaps Blue Harbor wasn't quite the pressure cooker I had feared. The headmistress, Dr. Sharma, greeted each family personally. "Ah, the Harrington twins," she said warmly. "And this must be grandmother." "Nightingale," I supplied. "Ophelia Nightingale." "Mrs. Nightingale owns Nightingale Books downtown," Eleanor added proudly. "The children have practically grown up surrounded by literature." Dr. Sharma's eyes lit up. "The independent bookshop on Maple? I'm a frequent customer. Your curation of children's classics is unparalleled." Richard looked surprised at this connection, this validation of my world from someone whose opinion he clearly valued. "We're very fortunate to have such a literary influence in the family," he said, the words emerging somewhat mechanically, but without detectable insincerity. Dr. Sharma smiled. "Indeed. Research consistently shows that children with diverse adult influences, parents, grandparents, teachers, develop more robust social-emotional skills and broader perspectives." She turned to the twins. "You two are very lucky to have such a supportive extended family." As she moved on to greet the next arrivals, I caught Richard's thoughtful expression. Another seed planted, perhaps. The moment of actual separation was harder than anticipated. Lucas clung to Eleanor's hand, his earlier excitement evaporating in the face of the unknown. Lily, ever the observer, stood quietly, her small fingers twisting the strap of her new backpack. "What if nobody likes me?" Lucas whispered, loud enough for all of us to hear. Before Eleanor could respond, Richard crouched down to his son's level, an uncharacteristically physical connection. "Lucas," he said, his voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. "Do you remember when we visited the Architects Expo last month? How you built that tower that everyone admired?" Lucas nodded, momentarily distracted from his anxiety. "You have gifts to share with these children. Things only you can contribute. They're fortunate to have you joining their class." It wasn't a perfect response, still achievement-focused. But the sentiment behind it, the attempt to bolster his son's confidence, rather than dismiss his fears, marked genuine effort on Richard's part. Eleanor added her own reassurance, reminding both children that they had each other and that she would be waiting right outside at pickup time. I contributed by slipping each twin a small bookmark with an encouraging quote, tokens they could touch during the day if they felt alone. As we watched them walk into their classrooms, Eleanor wiped away a tear. They look so small in those uniforms. Richard checked his watch again. "I need to get to the office. That Johnson project won't finalize itself." Eleanor's face fell slightly at his abrupt shift to work mode. "Of course. I'll see you tonight?" "Dinner, yes, though I may be late." He hesitated, then added, "Text me after pickup. Let me know how they did." A small concession, but meaningful in context. Eleanor nodded. "I will." After Richard departed, Eleanor and I walked slowly back to the parking area. "He's trying," she said, answering my unspoken question. "In his way." "I can see that," I acknowledged. "The therapy seems to be helping." "It's early days," she cautioned. "Dr. Abernathy says Richard exhibits classic patterns of intergenerational trauma, repeating the emotional detachment and performance pressure his father instilled in him." She sighed. "Unlearning decades of conditioning takes time." "But it's possible," I reminded her. "Look at Margaret. She enabled that dynamic for years but is finding her voice now." Eleanor smiled wryly. "She called Richard's father a controlling old bastard in therapy last week. I thought Richard might collapse from shock." I laughed at the image. Good. For her. Better late than never. "Speaking of Margaret," Eleanor said, checking her phone, "she's invited us for lunch. Says she has something important to discuss. Are you free?" An hour later, we were seated in Margaret's sunroom, a bright space that had recently undergone transformation. The formal French provincial furniture replaced with comfortable modern pieces. The stuffy drapes exchanged for light, flowing curtains. Like its owner, the room seemed to be shedding its rigid exterior. "Thank you both for coming," Margaret said, pouring tea into delicate cups. "Especially on such an important day. How were the twins this morning?" "Nervous but brave," Eleanor replied. "The usual first-day jitters." Margaret nodded. "Blue, Harbor can be intimidating initially, but they'll adjust quickly. It's actually an excellent program, despite Richard and John's reasons for choosing it." She set down the teapot. "Which brings me to why I asked you here." She reached for a leather portfolio on the side table and opened it to reveal legal documents. "I've been doing a great deal of thinking about legacy lately, about what truly matters in a family." Her fingers traced the edge of the papers. "John and I made certain choices in raising Richard, prioritizing achievement over emotional connection, status over joy. I see now how profoundly damaging that approach was." Eleanor and I exchanged glances, uncertain where this was heading. "I can't undo those choices," Margaret continued, "but I can ensure that different values guide the next generation." She slid the documents across the table. "I've revised my will and established a trust for Lily and Lucas, but with certain stipulations." Eleanor picked up the papers cautiously. "What kind of stipulations?" "The funds will be available for their education, but not exclusively for prestigious institutions. Gap years for travel or service, trade schools, artistic pursuits, entrepreneurial ventures, all are equally supported. The only requirement is that their choices be authentic expressions of their own interests and talents." I felt a surge of admiration for this unexpected ally. "That's remarkably thoughtful, Margaret." She smiled faintly. "There's more. I've established a matching fund for the Theodore Nightingale Literary Foundation. For every dollar the foundation awards in scholarships, the trust will contribute an equal amount." Eleanor looked up from the documents, clearly stunned. "Margaret, the amounts here are substantial." "John left everything to me," she said simply. "Far more than I need or want. I'd rather see it used meaningfully during my lifetime." She turned to me. "Ophelia, your decision to establish the foundation was a catalyst. It forced all of us to re-examine our values, our priorities. I'd like to honor that courage by ensuring the foundation's future." I reached across the table and squeezed her. Hand, too, moved for immediate words. "There's one more thing," Margaret continued. "A portion of the trust is earmarked specifically for family experiences. Travel, adventures, shared projects. Not material possessions, but memories created together." Her voice softened. "The kind of moments John and I never prioritized with Richard." "Does Richard know about this?" Eleanor asked quietly. Margaret shook her head. "Not yet. He'll be resistant initially. His father's voice is still quite loud in his head. But in time, I hope he'll understand that this isn't about rejecting achievement, but rather expanding our definition of what constitutes a successful life. As we discussed the practical details of Margaret's plans, I marveled at how profoundly our family dynamics had shifted in just a few weeks. From Richard's cold declaration that I wasn't welcome in his home to this, 3 generations of women collaborating to create a more balanced, nurturing future for the twins. Later that afternoon, Eleanor and I waited outside Blue Harbor for dismissal. She had taken the entire day off work, another small rebellion against Richard's expectation that she would immediately resume a full-time schedule, despite the twins' adjustment period. "I've been thinking," she said, watching the school entrance, anxiously, "about purpose, direction. Richard assumes I'll return to marketing, but I'm not sure that's what I want anymore." "What are you considering?" I asked, curious about this new thread of independence. "Working with you, actually." She turned to face me fully. "The bookshop has always been your domain, and I respect that. But with the foundation expanding, thanks to Margaret's generosity, there's going to be more administrative work, more community outreach. I thought, perhaps, you'd like to help manage the foundation?" I finished for her, surprised but intrigued. She nodded. "Part-time, while the twins adjust to school. But yes, I'd like to be part of building something meaningful. Something that honors Dad's memory and your vision." My heart swelled with unexpected joy. For years, I had run the bookshop alone, never expecting Eleanor to take interest in this, part of her heritage. Her focus had always been on corporate advancement, on proving herself in Richard's world of prestige and competition. "I would love that," I said simply. "Having you involved would mean everything to me." The school doors opened then, children spilling out in orderly lines of blue and gray. Lily spotted us immediately, waving with uncharacteristic enthusiasm. Lucas trailed behind her, chatting animatedly with a boy his age. Both looked infinitely more relaxed than they had that morning. "Mom! Grandma!" Lily called, breaking into a run. "I got to feed the class rabbit, and Ms. Peterson says my handwriting is the neatest in the class." Lucas arrived seconds later, breathless with excitement. "We're learning about dinosaurs next week. Real scientific dinosaurs, not just the cartoon kind. And Jamie has the same Tyrannosaurus model I do." Eleanor knelt to embrace them both. "Sounds like you had a wonderful first day." "The best," Lucas agreed. "Can Jamie come play sometime? His mom says he can if it's okay with you." "Of course," Eleanor said, helping them with their backpacks. "We can arrange that soon." As we walked toward the parking lot, the twins bubbling with stories of their day, I noticed a familiar car pulling in, Richard's sleek black sedan. He emerged, straightening his tie, looking slightly harried but present. "Daddy," Lily spotted. Him first, her face lighting up with surprise. "You came to pick up." Richard approached, his professional demeanor softening slightly. "I wanted to hear about your first day. Thought I might take you all for ice cream to celebrate." Eleanor's eyebrows rose in astonishment. "Ice cream? Before dinner?" A flicker of the old rigidity crossed Richard's face, then smoothed away. "Special occasions merit special treats, don't they?" Lucas looked from his father to his mother, clearly trying to process this unexpected deviation from routine. "Like, when Grandma lets us have dessert first sometimes." Richard's lips tightened momentarily, but he managed a nod. "Something like that." "That's very thoughtful, Richard," I said carefully, preparing to excuse myself from what seemed like a family moment. "You'll join us, Ophelia?" It wasn't quite an invitation, more an acknowledgement of my place in the equation now. "I'd be delighted," I replied, recognizing the effort this represented. The ice cream shop was crowded with other families celebrating. First days, the atmosphere vibrant with childhood excitement. Richard seemed uncomfortable initially, his posture too stiff for the casual setting. his eyes darting to check if clients or colleagues might witness this domestic scene. But as the twins recounted their day between bites of mint chocolate chip and strawberry swirl, he gradually relaxed. He asked questions, genuinely listened to their answers, even smiled at Lucas's animated description of the classroom pet snake named Sir Slithers. Eleanor caught my eye across the table. Her expression, a mix of cautious hope and lingering wariness. This Richard, engaged, present, prioritizing his children over work for an afternoon, was the partner she had glimpsed early in their relationship, before social climbing and image management had taken precedence. Sir Slithers reminds me of something, Richard said, wiping ice cream from Lily's chin with surprising tenderness. When I was about your age, I had a pet turtle, Theodore. The twins' eyes widened at this revelation. You had a pet? Lucas asked, clearly struggling to imagine his father with something so ordinary, so childlike. Richard nodded, a distant look crossing his face. For 3 years, until what? Lily prompted when he fell silent. Richard's expression clouded. Until my father decided pets were a distraction from academic excellence. He gave Theodore away while I was at school one day. The parallels to Goofy's fate, the dog they had so callously removed from my life, hung unspoken in the air, between the adults. Eleanor reached across the table and touched Richard's hand lightly. I'm sorry that happened to you, she said softly. Richard withdrew his hand, discomfort evident in his posture. It was a long time ago, and my father wasn't wrong about focus. I did excel academically after that. But were you happy? The question slipped out before I could reconsider its directness. Richard stared at me, something vulnerable flickering behind his carefully constructed facade. Happiness wasn't the point. Achievement was. What if both are possible? Eleanor suggested gently. What if the twins could excel and have joy, keep their classroom focus and still have pets, free time, creativity? Richard didn't respond. Immediately, his attention shifting to Lucas, who was creating an elaborate pattern with his spoon in the melting ice cream. That's quite the design, son. Lucas beamed at the acknowledgement. It's an architectural blueprint, like the ones in your office. See, this is the main entrance, and these are support columns, and here's the central atrium. Surprise registered on Richard's face, not just at his son's imaginative play, but at the realization that Lucas had been paying attention to his work, finding ways to connect with his father's world on his own terms. It's very creative, Richard said, his voice softening. You've incorporated load-bearing principles quite naturally. Can I visit your office again sometime? Lucas asked hopefully. I want to see more of the real blueprints. I'd like that, Richard replied, and for once, the warmth in his voice seemed entirely genuine. On the drive home, the twins dozed in the back seat of Eleanor's car while Richard followed in his own vehicle. I sat beside my daughter, contemplating the subtle shifts in family dynamics I'd witnessed today. He mentioned his turtle, Eleanor said quietly, her eyes on the road. He's never talked about childhood pets before. Never mentioned his father taking Theodore away. The therapy is working, I observed. He's beginning to connect his own childhood experiences with his parenting choices. Dr. Abernathy says that's the hardest part, recognizing the patterns without becoming defensive about repeating them. Eleanor sighed. He still has these moments of rigidity, of controlling behavior. But then there are breakthroughs like today, and I remember why I fell in love with him in the first place. What was he like then? I asked, realizing I'd never really understood the attraction beyond Richard's obvious good looks and professional success. Eleanor smiled faintly. Passionate, brilliant, and underneath the confidence, surprisingly vulnerable. He would show me his designs, not the ones for clients, but his personal projects. Buildings that flowed like music, spaces that prioritized human experience over mere function. Her smile faded. His father hated them, called them impractical, unmarketable. Eventually, Richard stopped creating them entirely. That explains a great deal, I murmured, thinking of the sterile precision of Richard's current architectural style. Impressive but soulless, technically perfect but emotionally vacant. I keep hoping that man is still in there somewhere, Eleanor admitted. The one who cared about beauty, feeling, connection. The one who designed a reading nook for me when we were first married, because he knew how much I loved to curl up with a book. The image caught me by surprise. He designed something specifically for your comfort? Your pleasure? She nodded. A window seat with perfect natural light, built-in shelves, cushions that fit my exact proportions. He spent weeks getting it right. Her voice grew wistful. When we moved to the current house, there was no space for it. I didn't realize at the time that it was more than furniture being left behind. We fell silent then, each lost in our own thoughts about what had been lost and what might yet be reclaimed. As we pulled into the driveway, Richard parked behind us, approaching Eleanor's window with an unreadable expression. "I'll take the twins up for their baths," he offered. "You two probably have foundation matters to discuss." Eleanor exchanged a glance with me. "Actually, we do. I'm considering taking a role with the Theodore Nightingale Literary Foundation, part-time administrative work while the twins adjust to school." Richard's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "I thought, we agreed you'd return to your marketing position. We discussed it," Eleanor corrected gently. "But this feels right to me, Richard. Meaningful work with flexible hours, and it honors my father's memory." I expected resistance, perhaps even anger. Instead, Richard was quiet for a moment, his gaze shifting between Eleanor and the sleeping children in the back seat. "Will it make you happy?" he asked finally, the question evidently difficult for him to articulate. Eleanor looked momentarily startled by the directness of his inquiry. "Yes," she said simply. "I believe it will." Richard nodded stiffly. "Then we should discuss the practical details later. Schedule adjustments, childcare contingencies." It wasn't enthusiasm, but it was acceptance, grudging perhaps, but real. Another small step toward genuine partnership. "Thank you," Eleanor said softly. After Richard had taken the drowsy twins inside, Eleanor turned to me with wondering eyes. Did that just happen? Did Richard actually consider my happiness as a valid factor in a family decision? "Progress," I said, squeezing her hand. "Not perfection, but progress." In the days that followed, Eleanor and I began establishing her role within the foundation. We converted the small office above the bookshop into a shared workspace, clearing decades of accumulated storage to make room for a second desk, comfortable seating for meetings, and a children's corner for those inevitable days when school schedules and foundation work would overlap. Richard maintained a carefully neutral stance on these developments, neither enthusiastic nor openly obstructive. He focused his energy on the family therapy sessions, approaching them with the same meticulous preparation he brought to client meetings, reading recommended books, completing worksheets, participating in the exercises Dr. Abernathy suggested, all with a determined efficiency that somewhat missed the emotional point, but represented effort nonetheless. The twins continued to thrive at Blue Harbor, their natural intelligence nurtured by teachers who recognized their individual strengths, Lucas's spatial reasoning and creative problem-solving, Lily's verbal acuity and empathetic nature. They made friends, joined activities, developed interests distinct from the rigid pathway Richard had initially envisioned. And gradually, almost imperceptibly, our family found a new rhythm. Sunday dinners at my house became a regular tradition, with Richard initially attending out of obligation, but eventually participating more genuinely in the relaxed conversation and occasional board games that followed the meal. Margaret joined us frequently, her relationship with her son warming as they both work to break old patterns. One Sunday evening, about a month after the twins started school, Richard lingered after dinner while Eleanor helped the children gather their things. He stood awkwardly in my living room, examining the bookshelves as if suddenly fascinated by their contents. "Theodore had quite the collection," he observed, running his finger along the spines of my late husband's economics texts. "He believed in lifelong learning," I replied, placing the last of the dinner dishes in the sink to soak. These were his professional resources, but upstairs are all the novels, poetry, history, his true passions. Richard nodded absently, then turned to face me directly. "Ophelia, I've been meaning to ask you something." His serious tone caught my attention. "Yes?" "The bookshop. How is it faring financially, with you devoting time to the foundation now, and Eleanor joining part-time?" I tensed slightly, uncertain of his motivation. "The shop is stable, not enormously profitable, but sustainable. Why do you ask?" He hesitated, clearly choosing his words carefully. "I've been working on a project, a personal one, in my free time. It's a design for a renovation, an expansion of your space." Of all the things he might have said, this was perhaps the last I expected. An expansion? Of the bookshop? Richard reached into his briefcase and pulled out a rolled set of preliminary drawings. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward the dining table. Still bewildered, I nodded. He spread the drawings out, revealing detailed plans for a transformed Nightingale Books. The essential character remained: the warm wooden shelving, the reading nooks, the children's corner, but the space was expanded, modernized, optimized, for both commerce and community. "You've incorporated the vacant storefront next door," I observed, studying the flowing layout that connected the two spaces. Richard nodded. "It's been empty for nearly a year. The owner is willing to sell for a reasonable price. The combined spaces would allow for a proper cafe area here, expanded children's programming there, and this section," he pointed to a beautifully designed corner with abundant natural light, "would be dedicated foundation space. For scholarship, recipients to study, for community literature programs, for author events." I stared at the plans, then at Richard, struggling to reconcile this thoughtful, creative design with the controlling man who had declared me unwelcome in his home just months ago. "This is remarkable work," I said finally. "But I don't understand. Why would you invest your time in designing this? And the cost of such a renovation, let alone purchasing the adjacent property?" "The design is a gift," he said simply. "As for the rest, I've spoken with Margaret. She's willing to contribute substantially as part of her commitment to the foundation. The remainder would come from a small business development grant I've identified. You would maintain complete ownership and control." I searched his face for hidden motives, for the catch that surely must exist. "Richard, why would you do this?" He looked almost embarrassed, his typical confidence momentarily absent. "I've been thinking about legacy, about what I'm teaching Lucas and Lily through my actions, not just my words." He gestured toward the plans. "This project combines good business. The shop's sustainability would improve significantly, with genuine community value. The kind of balance I want them to understand." Eleanor appeared in the doorway, her eyes widening at the sight of the architectural drawings. "What's all this?" Richard explained his proposal again as she examined the plans with growing amazement. When he finished, she looked up at him with an expression I hadn't seen in years, genuine admiration. "This is beautiful work, Richard. It feels like your early designs, when you used to consider how spaces affected people emotionally, not just functionally." A flash of vulnerability crossed his face at this recognition. "I've been revisiting those principles. Dr. Abernathy suggested I reconnect with earlier motivations, with what drew me to architecture initially." And this is the result? I asked, gesturing to the plans. He nodded. It's a beginning. A small step toward a balance. The word hung in the air between us, weighted with significance. Balance between ambition and joy, between discipline and freedom, between achievement and connection. The very quality our family had been struggling to find. I'd be honored to consider this proposal seriously, I said, careful not to either dismiss or too eagerly embrace what was clearly an important gesture for him. Perhaps we could discuss the details further this week? Richard nodded, visibly relieved. Of course. Take all the time you need to review the plans. As they prepared to leave, the twins sleepy and content after an evening of family connection, I watched Richard help Lucas with his jacket, patiently guiding small arms into sleeves without taking over completely. A small interaction, easily overlooked, but emblematic of the subtle shifts occurring within him, learning to support without controlling, to guide without dominating. Eleanor hung back as Richard took the children to the car, turning to embrace me tightly. Did you ever imagine 2 months ago that we'd be here? That he would be designing expansion plans for your bookshop of all things? Life's capacity to surprise us never diminishes, I replied, returning her hug. Though I suspect your influence has been significant in this evolution. She shook her head. Not just mine. Yours, Margaret's, the twins, Dr. Abernathy's. It's taken all of us to help him begin to see beyond the narrow definition of success his father instilled. And there's still a long road ahead, I cautioned. Of course, she agreed. He still has moments of rigidity, of reverting to old patterns. But for the first time in years, I see him genuinely trying to connect. With me, with the twins, even with you. She smiled wryly. All because you were brave enough to cancel those college funds when he said you weren't welcome. Sometimes love requires difficult choices, I said softly. Standing firm rather than enabling harmful patterns. As I watched them drive away, the house fell into a peaceful quiet. I returned to the dining table where Richard's architectural plans still lay unrolled, studying the thoughtful details, the careful integration of old and new, the spaces designed for both solitude and connection. Perhaps this was his way of apologizing, of acknowledging my place in the family without having to verbalize the emotional admission that still came so difficultly to him. Perhaps it was his attempt to build a bridge between our worlds, to create common ground where we had once had only conflict. Whatever his motivation, it represented possibility, for healing, for growth, for the family legacy to evolve into something healthier than what had come before. And for now, that possibility was enough. 6 months passed with remarkable swiftness. The renovation of Nightingale Books had transformed not just my business, but the entire block, breathing new life into our little corner of downtown. The cafe area, managed by a local baker who had received one of our first foundation scholarships, bustled with activity from morning until evening. The expanded children's section hosted daily reading hours and weekend workshops. The foundation space had become a hub for community literacy programs and mentoring sessions. Spring sunshine poured through the new skylights as I arranged a display of gardening books near the front window. The bell above the door chimed, and Lucas burst in, followed more sedately by Lily and Eleanor. "Grandma, look what I made at school." Lucas thrust a colorful construction paper creation into my hands. "It's a 3D model of the water cycle. See? How the clouds pop up when you pull this tab." I admired his handiwork with genuine enthusiasm. "This is marvelous engineering, Lucas. Your attention to detail is impressive." He beamed at the praise. "Dad helped me figure out the pull tab mechanism. He said it's like a simplified version of kinetic architecture." "Sounds like your father," I said, smiling at Eleanor over the children's heads. "Where is Richard this afternoon?" "Meeting at the foundation space," she replied, helping Lily remove her light spring jacket. Finalizing details for the scholarship ceremony next week. The ceremony would mark the official awarding of the first Theodore Nightingale Literary Foundation scholarships, 10 deserving students who would receive financial support for their educational pursuits. That Richard had taken an active role in planning this event, voluntarily committing his design expertise and professional connections, spoke volumes about the evolution of our family dynamics. "Grandma, can I read to the little kids today?" Lily asked, already eyeing the reading circle where toddlers were beginning to gather for the afternoon story hour. "Of course, dear. Why don't you choose a book from the new spring collection? Mrs. Calloway will help you." As Lily skipped off toward the children's section, Lucas settled himself at one of the cafe tables with his homework. Comfortable and at home in this space that bridged his grandmother's world and his father's contributions. "He seems more relaxed," I observed quietly to Eleanor. "Both of them do." She nodded, watching her son concentrate on his math worksheet. "The therapy has helped tremendously. That and Richard's efforts to connect with them as individuals, not just extensions of his ambitions." She smiled wryly. "He still struggles with perfectionism, still pushes for excellence, but he's learning to see their unique paths, not just the one he predetermined." "And between you two?" I asked, arranging the last of the gardening books. "Better," she said simply. "Not perfect, but genuinely better. He's present now, emotionally, not just physically, and I've found my voice again." She touched a small pin on her blouse, the foundation's logo, a stylized open book. "This work has been transformative for me. Thank you for making space for me in it." "You've earned that space," I assured her. "The Children's Literacy Initiative was entirely your creation, and the scholarship committee values your perspective enormously." She glanced toward the cafe where customers lingered over pastries and books. Richard's design vision didn't hurt either. I'd forgotten how talented he is when he creates from passion rather than obligation. "Speaking of Richard's designs," I said, lowering my voice, "has he mentioned anything more about his personal project, the community center concept?" Eleanor's eyes lit up. "He's presenting it to the city planning committee next month. It's remarkable work, Mom. Spaces designed for intergenerational interaction. Areas that transform based on community needs, sustainable materials throughout. It's like watching the old Richard reemerge, the one who believed architecture could improve lives, not just impress clients." The bell chimed again, and Margaret entered, elegant as always, but with a softness to her appearance that had been absent in earlier years. She carried a bakery box and a folder of papers. "I bring celebration scones," she announced, setting the box on the counter, "and the final scholarship profiles for next week's ceremony." "Perfect timing," Eleanor said, greeting her mother-in-law with a warm hug that would have been unimaginable a year ago. Lucas was just finishing his homework, and Lily's about to read to the toddlers. "We can review the profiles while we have our tea." Margaret beamed at the mention of her grandchildren's activities. "Lucas, darling, come show grandmother what you're working on." The easy affection between them, Margaret's genuine interest, Lucas's comfortable response, reinforced how far we had all traveled from those tense, performative family interactions of the past. As we settled in the cafe area with our tea and scones, spreading the scholarship recipient profiles across the table, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This work, honoring Theodore's memory, supporting education, building community, had become the heart of our family's shared purpose. Even Richard, initially resistant to anything that diverted resources from his children's predetermined path, had found meaning in contributing his skills to this larger vision. "Where is my wayward son this afternoon?" Margaret asked, reviewing. The biographical sketch of a young woman who had overcome significant obstacles to pursue her education. "Foundation space, finalizing ceremony details," Eleanor replied, sorting the profiles into presentation order. Margaret smiled knowingly. Ah, yes. He's become quite invested in the event, hasn't he? Even John has noticed the change in him. John Harrington, Richard's father, remained largely on the periphery of our family renaissance. His rigid worldview and controlling nature had proven more resistant to evolution than his wife's, but even he had begun to observe, if not fully, appreciate the positive changes in his son and grandchildren. Has John decided whether he'll attend the ceremony? I asked carefully. Margaret sighed. He's non-committal. Says these charitable endeavors aren't his area of interest. She shook her head. 60 years of marriage, and sometimes I wonder if I ever really knew the man. It's never too late to choose differently, Eleanor reminded her gently. You've shown us all that. The foundation doorbell chimed again, and Richard appeared, his arms full of mounting boards and display materials. Lucas immediately abandoned his homework to help his father, while Lily, having finished her reading session, rushed over to examine the colorful presentation materials. I think we've resolved the stage layout issue, Richard announced, spreading architectural renderings across an empty table. If we position the podium here and the scholarship recipients along this axis, everyone in the audience will have clear sightlines, and the foundation banner will be prominently displayed for photographs. The precision of his planning brought a smile to my face. Some aspects of Richard's personality remained unchanged, his attention to detail and pursuit of excellence channeled now into more balanced purposes. It looks perfect, Eleanor assured, him examining the renderings. You've thought of everything. Not quite everything, he admitted, unexpectedly humble. I still need to finalize my remarks for the ceremony. This announcement caught us all by surprise. Richard had agreed to attend the event, to lend his professional support to the logistics, but had not volunteered to speak publicly. Your remarks? I echoed. He nodded, straightening the already perfectly aligned display boards. As a family representative, I thought it appropriate, given that the foundation bears your husband's name, that someone should speak about legacy, about how one person's values can ripple outward, influencing generations. The significance of this gesture wasn't lost on any of us. Richard, who had once dismissed my influence in his children's lives, who had seen my financial support as an entitlement rather than a gift, was now voluntarily positioning himself as a spokesperson for the very values he had previously rejected. I think that would be lovely, I said simply, knowing that overemphasis might cause him to retreat from this vulnerable offering. That evening, as the shop closed and the family prepared to depart, Richard lingered behind, helping me straighten the last of the displays. We worked in comfortable silence for several minutes before he spoke. Ophelia, he began, his voice uncharacteristically tentative. I've been meaning to say something to you. About the past, about how I behaved when you told me I wasn't welcome in your home, I supplied gently when he faltered. He nodded, color rising in his cheeks. Yes, that and many other things. The way I dismissed your role in the children's lives, the way I treated your financial support as an entitlement. He set down the book he'd been reshelving and faced me directly. I was wrong, profoundly wrong, and I'm sorry. The simple, unadorned apology, no excuses, no qualifications, caught me by surprise. Richard had demonstrated his changed perspective through actions over the past months, but direct verbal acknowledgement of his past behavior had remained elusive. Thank you, I said quietly. That means a great deal. Dr. Abernathy says I've been hiding behind gestures, the shop renovation, the foundation support, to avoid the vulnerability of direct amends. He smiled wryly. She's irritatingly perceptive. Good therapists usually are, I replied, returning his smile. But the gestures matter too, Richard. They show sustained commitment, not just momentary remorse. He nodded, visibly relieved at my response. The ceremony next week. I'd like you to review my remarks before I finalize them. to ensure I've captured the spirit of Theodore's legacy accurately. I'd be honored, I assured him. Though I suspect you understand that legacy better than you realize. The balance of excellence and compassion, of achievement and joy, that's what Theodore believed in. What he tried to embody as a professor, as a father, as a man. Richard was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. I wish I had known him, he said finally. I think perhaps he could have shown me a different model of success than my father did. He would have liked you, I said, surprising myself with the realization that this was now true. Especially the you that's emerging now, the one who designs spaces with heart as well as precision, who's learning to see his children as individuals rather than extensions of himself. Eleanor appeared in the doorway, the twins already bundled into light jackets beside her. Ready to go? Margaret's expecting us for dinner at 7. Richard nodded, gathering his portfolio. Just finishing up here. As they prepared to leave, Lucas tugged at my hand. Grandma, you're coming to Sunday dinner tomorrow, right? Dad's making his special pasta and I'm helping with the sauce. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I promised, touched by the casual certainty in his voice, the piety. Complete absence of doubt about my place in their family gatherings. Standing in the doorway of the renovated bookshop, watching them walk to their car together, Richard's hand resting lightly on Eleanor's back, the twins skipping ahead, Margaret waiting at home to complete their circle, I felt a profound sense of completion. When Richard had declared that I wasn't welcome, when I had made the difficult decision to cancel the college funds that day, I couldn't have imagined the cascade of positive changes that would follow. What had begun as a necessary boundary, a refusal to be erased from my grandchildren's lives, had catalyzed a family renaissance, painful at times, imperfect still, but guided by more authentic values. Theodore would have been proud, I thought, not just of the foundation bearing his name, but of the family that had found its way back to genuine connection, to balanced priorities, to love that supported growth rather than demanded conformity. As I turned to lock up the shop, my gaze fell on the small plaque beside the door, installed during the renovation. Its simple inscription captured everything. Nightingale Books and Theodore Nightingale Literary Foundation, where stories connect. Us education empowers us and family sustains us. Family, not just by blood or marriage, but by choice, by commitment, by the daily decision to see each other truly and love each other anyway. That was the legacy worth building. That was the inheritance I truly wanted for my grandchildren. And that was the gift that had emerged from that difficult day when I'd been told I wasn't welcome, and I'd found the courage to stand firm instead of fading away. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.